Hi, I'm John Feldt. We started off the winter season on January 1st with 67% of the nation covered in snow. And that's a record, at least for the most snow that's covered the U.S. in the last 10 years. We're about 60% coverage right now, so it'll be interesting to see what the rest of the winter brings as far as snow cover. You might remember I said we were either in a neutral or a slightly positive Arctic oscillation, and with that we tend to get a split jet stream with a northerly branch and a southerly branch. The cold air is held up to our north on that northerly branch, and we've got to keep an eye on that southerly branch as far as steering precipitation to our area. Now last week, even though there was some rainfall over the southeast U.S., for the most part the southerly branch was fairly quiet. This week it's going to be very active, but the energy looks like it's going to eject from Texas up towards the northeast, just brushing Mississippi and much less over Alabama and hardly any over Georgia or the Carolinas. There's a possibility late this week or early next that the jet could push off a little bit further east and give us a better chance of rain. But for the most part, it looks like a fairly quiet week, except for four western parts of the southeast U.S. Stay tuned for information on precipitation this week and more on this week's edition of the Weekly Water Outlook. Here's the precipitation that fell over the southeast U.S. last week. You can see the axis of heaviest rain extended again across Mississippi, the northern half of Alabama, and the northern third of Georgia. That area of green received a soaking rain anywhere from a ½ inch to the pockets of 2 inches in yellow. It dropped off very abruptly here south of this line, so anywhere across the eastern parts of the Carolinas and southern part of Georgia. Now there is an exception here. This went over the area of drought, which was once again welcome, but for the most part much lighter south of that line, only about a ½ inch or less in that region. Now if we look at the percent of normal precipitation, the areas of green and blue are above normal, and the areas of red are below normal. Florida well below normal. Eastern Carolinas definitely well below normal, and generally speaking, southern Alabama and southern Georgia are below normal. Wanted to point out there was just a bit of snow over higher elevations. You can see those areas of purple. Those are very light amounts of snow. The more significant snow was over the middle part of the nation, Kansas into the northern part of Missouri. Now if we look at the snowpack or the snow depth, as of this recording, what you can see here are the heavier amounts of snow or the darker shades of blue, and for the most part nothing really close to the southeast U.S. So far this year, other than a very light amount in the higher elevations. Now we have had some erosion of the drought conditions over the southeast U.S., and now we're sort of on the balancing point of some areas of the southeast U.S. are vulnerable for flooding, and other areas can still use some rain. And these are soil moisture percentiles, and what we see here are the greens are areas of above normal, and a number of months ago we had pretty much all deficits or below normal percentiles. Right now we're seeing more and more areas of above normal, and I wouldn't say that these are vulnerable for flooding yet, but this area right in here is getting close. I think definitely in Mississippi now and getting close into the northern part of Alabama, we've sort of reached that threshold where it's getting to be greater vulnerability for flooding versus issues with drought. The other area that seems some improvement is the very core of drought. You look at the soil moisture percentiles now, they're more neutral in this area. There are a number of things we could look at. That area still needs rain. It can still take 3-4 inches of rain, but we've definitely seen improvement over the last couple weeks over that core of deep drought in Georgia. Now this is the amount of rain needed to bring back to a neutral area, and generally that's 3 to 6 inches of rain, and there's been a little bit of rain last week, so that's probably more, anywhere on the order of 2 or 3 inches of rain would go a long way in that area to bring us back up to normal conditions. But you can see the rest of the southeast U.S. is definitely quite a bit improvement and quite a bit more towards the neutral conditions. Now the Arctic oscillation, we've gone through a number of phases so far this winter season. I've indicated them by numbers 1, 2, and 3. The first one, number 1, was a positive phase that extended through most of November. Then we had that prolonged negative phase of Arctic oscillation that extended from mid-November through mid-December. And then more recently, we've gone into a positive phase or a neutral to positive phase, which is number 3. And then if you look at the red lines, the forecast, it looks very possible we could get back into a negative. So as we go through the winter season, you're going to see that we're going through these oscillations. Each one gives us a typical type precipitation pattern. And they've worked out very well so far this season as we've gone through these. And over the Southeast U.S., we see typical patterns with either a positive or a negative oscillation. And that's what we would expect to see as we go through the rest of the winter. Now, it'll be interesting as we get into the real peak of our runoff season, what oscillation that we're in, because at that time, if we happen to be in an oscillation that would bring us a lot of rain during the time when we're most vulnerable for runoff, that would be important. Now, I want to go through a loop of the big picture for this week, sort of give you an idea of what to expect. And what we have here, let me start off in the beginning. This is a loop right here, and I'm going to start off right here. Okay, here's the beginning here. And what I mentioned last week that with a positive Arctic oscillation, we get a sort of a southwesterly flow and a northerly jet. And the northerly jet will hold off the cold air. It's going to stay north of that. So that generally in a positive Arctic oscillation, this northerly, the primary jet, stays to our north, and it holds the cold air north of us. And then, so it depends on this southerly jet, how much energy is involved in this. Last week it was very weak, didn't do a whole lot. Let's take a look at this week. Okay, so as we go through this week, we have a very strong pocket of energy coming out of the Southwest U.S. Now, that's typical with this positive Arctic oscillation. Again, here's your cold air north of the primary jet, well to the north. And if this will eject more into the Southeast U.S., we could get heavy rain. What it looks like it's going to do is eject out generally west of the Southeast U.S. and begin to dissipate as it gets embedded in the upper flow. So as we get in the middle of the week, this is the area of energy. It comes up through Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, up into the parts of the Ohio Valley. It's going to brush the Southeast U.S., but it's going to be dissipating as it moves up towards the Northeast, or at least diminishing, and it's going to be generally to the west. So the story will be that there will be a precipitation event, but it should be west of our region. Now here's another one that comes through later in the week. Again, that's to the west. So the story is, even though we have a positive Arctic oscillation, it does look like the energy is off to the west, and with that energy off to the west, it's going to mean not a whole lot of precipitation over the Southeast U.S. Now, this is a 6 to 10 day jet stream analysis, and it again shows that the jet stream is off to the west. And if I draw it in here, it digs a deep trough over the Southwest U.S., and then it moves up towards the Northeast U.S. I suspect that the mean position of this jet is far enough west that any systems that come out are generally going to be west of us, and it could be that Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, Ohio Valley, parts of the western Tennessee Valley could be quite a bit wetter than the far southeast U.S. We'll have to see if this pulls off a little bit east. It would be a little bit more action for our region, but right now it looks like with that pattern, where that jet stream aligns is really going to make the difference on how much precipitation the southeast U.S. gets. And that might be important. These are upper soil moisture percentiles, and this is basically how much of a percent basis the upper soils are holding. So in other words, the top range here is 0.95. 95% of the upper soil is filled, and that's that area of blue. It ranges from 55% up to 90, but you can begin to see we're getting areas of blue over Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, in this region. And these are areas more vulnerable for runoff should heavy rain fall in. Those areas down here, the upper soils are much less filled and can hold more moisture. So I don't think we're in an area right now, a region where we're really expect a high vulnerability for runoff. But I think definitely in those areas of blue, mainly over Mississippi and parts of northern Alabama, another 2 inches of rain could probably really enhance runoff in those areas, because the upper soil moisture right now is fairly saturated. Now, if we look at the rainfall forecast for this week, what you see is that the heaviest rain, as I mentioned, as that energy ejects out to the west, it could brush Mississippi, a bit over northern part of Alabama, especially northwest Alabama, but for the most part, it's going to follow that track and going to stay off to our west as that energy lifts off to the Northeast U.S. Not much change in that story. If we look at this 7-day, now that upper trough is going to bump off a little bit further to the east, and that could bring heavier rain, a second band of rain late next week, or perhaps the week 2, over more of Alabama, northern half of Alabama, more northwest Georgia. But that's a ways off. We'll have to take a look on at what that'll bring. Overall, this week, as far as changes in soil moisture, like I said, being out the heaviest axis of rain being off to the west, it does look like the heaviest, more significant improvement in soil moisture, the positive changes, are in blue, and almost all of the Southeast U.S. will have modest decreases in soil moisture this week. So the trends and threats, as you can see in that dashed blue line, there will be some precipitation moving into Mississippi and parts of Alabama. The rest of the area should be a fairly quiet week until that second system comes in. So the takeaway points: an active southerly jet, a low ejects out of the southwest U.S., but for the most part, it's only going to impact parts of Mississippi, a small part of Alabama. But then the second system, maybe late next week into next weekend and even week 2, could bring it more into Mississippi and Alabama. Thank you for listening to this week's Weekly Water Outlook. I'll be talking again with you in about a week.